Hey, what's happening everybody? This is Kevin. Thanks for joining me for another video here at Midwest Woodcraft. Well, this week we're up to challenge number 14 over at the Spirit of the Woods Challenge Series. Jake Lewis and them boys been working us pretty hard over there. Been doing some challenges that I've tried before and quite a few that I haven't yet. This is going to be one of those that I have not yet tried. I've never made pine pitch glue. I've never really lived in a location where I had a lot of pine nearby readily available. I've always kind of had to drive to a specialized location. Well, I've kind of relocated lately, and we have a pine forest pretty much right in our backyard. So we got a lot of red pine, a lot of white pine out here. Red pine is what I look for a lot whenever I'm seeking out fat wood. It seems like it has a higher resin content than a lot of the other pines, and I have a lot of success finding good fat wood in red pine. So I'm going to be out here looking over both species, the red and the white, for resin. I've heard red is a little bit better for making glue, but I'm not going to be picky. I'm going to be an opportunist. Whatever I can find out here, I'm going to snag onto, including my other materials. I'm going to be looking in the fire pits on the way out to my campsite, be looking for hardwood charcoal. So I'll be collecting that up if I can find some. I'm going to be looking for dried animal droppings, such as rabbit or deer droppings. They eat plants, they partially digest them plants, and their droppings, when they're dried, they make a good additive to that pine pitch glue to add strength. So a lot of this will be trial and error. I've done quite a bit of research before I come out here as far as ratios and everything like that. So we'll just see what we come up with. Stick with me. I'll be right back. I'm going to be walking along this trail on my way in and kind of searching for damaged pine trees. See if I can collect some easy resin. Usually if you can find a spot where a branch has been broke off, or if the tree's been hit by another tree or a machine or something like that, those are really good areas to hunt for resin. You can usually get a lot of bang for your buck in there. This is also a great place to look for fat wood with all the red pine. There's fat wood galore out here, so a lot of times this is where I come out searching for fat wood. This here is a pretty good example. You can see here where this pine tree is fallen. It's mostly rotted away. You can see how these branches are still sticking up here. If I take my knife and tap around on them, they still sound pretty solid. If I cut into them, looks like that's a pretty decent piece of fat wood here, so I'll break that off. And you can see right there, looks like it's got pretty good resin content. So I'm going to take this with me. When we get where we're going, we can start our fire with it. Okay, so this is what we're looking for. You can see this damaged area of the tree. We're going to be able to collect plenty of resin from this little spot right here. Came across a few cedar trees. I'm going to scrape some bark off here, just a little bit. And we'll use that for our fibrous material when we're making our glue. We have our piece of fat wood that we found earlier. I'm just going to take and shave some pieces off there. Make some fuzz with the spine of our knife here. Scatter all of your sticks all over the place. We'll let this go for a little bit. Whenever it's down to coals, be back with you. Okay, so our fire's going, all of our resources are collected up. We have some cedar bark here. I'm going to grind that down real fine. We have some hardwood ash. Whenever I got here in the fire pit, there was a piece of oak, and I scraped some of the charcoal off of there. And then we have our pine resin. This is a mixture of white and red pine resin. So we'll melt this down, we'll grind this up, we'll smash this into powder, and then we'll mix them all together. What I'm going to do with it is, I haven't spent a whole lot of time, just down and dirty, but I have this flake of chert here. It's pretty good and sharp, and I'm going to take and just mount it onto a simple wooden handle. I've kind of done a little bit of carving on there, just kind of notched it to make it fit. It's not going to be anything special. It was just a flake that chipped off by chance whenever I was messing around. It's not perfectly straight. You can see it's got a bit of a curve. So I kind of had to notch this funny. Got kind of a wide notch in it. But with the pine resin and the false sinew, we should be able to make it stay in there pretty good. So, not going to spend a ton of time making it perfect. Our charcoal here, we're going to take and just smash it down into powder. Okay, so we got a pretty fine powder there. Okay, now I'm going to take the cedar bark, break it down as fine as I can. You can see how it's kind of making a dust falling down in here real fine. I'm going to collect it here. We're going to use it to put into our pine pitch glue. I don't know how good it's going to work. Never tried it. But it seems like it should work pretty good. Well, I've seen people use cattail fluff and things like that. So, okay, you can see here I have most of the coals pushed out from under this. I want real low heat here. I don't want this boiling too much. If it gets too hot, a lot like candy when you're making caramel or something like that, if you overheat it, it'll get brittle. So you do not want to overheat this. You just kind of want a nice low heat. You want to melt that down. As it melts down, you'll see it's got a lot of bark and stuff like that in there. You can start pulling that out. But the main thing is you don't want flame, because this is extremely flammable and it will burst in the flame and it'll burn like gas. You'll have a heck of a time getting it out, and if you boil it too much, it'll get too brittle, get too hard whenever you go to glue something. Talk to quite a few people who have a lot more experience in this than I do, and that was something they stressed a lot. Do not let it catch on fire. So you can see it's melting down pretty nicely. Big glob there. I'll let that go for a few minutes. Kind of stuck digging this stuff out. I don't have a strainer or anything with me. I've seen a lot of guys use the strainer in their videos, but that's not something that I really carry with me very often. Good thing about this over here, this bark and needles and things that I'm pulling out, is covered with this resin, and after that cools down, you can store that in your pack. You can always use that for a fire starter at a later date. It'll work really good for getting a fire going. As you can see, my resin had a lot of stuff in it. I think I got most of it out of there. Got a little bit in there. I'm going to put about half as much charcoal, maybe a little less, as I have resin. I don't want to put too much in there. Mix that up. Add just a tiny bit of the cedar bark dust. Just going to mix that up really, really good. Okay, now we have our little makeshift blade here. I'm just going to put some here to kind of hold this together. Okay, it's not the most beautiful thing in the world, but you can see where I heated that up. It kind of melted that pitch back, and it kind of glazed over and filled in all the little cracks and crevices. So we'll let that set back up, then we'll wrap it, and we'll see how she works. Got this false sinew here. Give her a few half hitches here. Okay, so if I do say so myself, the pine pitch turned out pretty good. I have a pitch stick here. It's not too hard or brittle, not too soft, but I can make an indention with my thumbnail there into it, so I think that's going to be good usable pitch for me in the future. So I'll definitely hold on to that. I have my little blade, not the prettiest thing in the world, but she sure is cute. You can see I just took that flake, we secured it in there with some pitch, put some pitch down at the other end so the handle wouldn't slide around. Then we wrapped it and tied it off with some false sinew. Turned out pretty good. It's actually pretty good and sharp. You can see it cut that false sinew pretty easily. So, not exactly an LT right, but it works pretty good. This would be pretty good for gutting a fish or something like that. I wouldn't use it for anything heavy duty. Probably actually will strike a ferro rod. It's pretty thin, but we can give it a try. Not great, but it will make a spark. So, there it is. I'd like to thank you all for coming along with me on my short little adventure, and I'd like to thank Jake and the boys over at Spirit of the Woods for putting on another challenge. If you like what you see here, click like, hit subscribe, leave us a comment down below. We always really love hearing what you have to say. Get out and practice, guys. See you in the woods real soon.